Have you ever tried to picture yourself not existing? Not being somewhere else, but completely gone from reality? It's like trying to bite down on your own teeth, right? Your mind does these wild gymnastics when it tries to wrap itself around the idea of just vanishing. Here's the thing that keeps us up at night, the nagging thought that one day you'll just stop existing. But let me throw something mind-blowing at you. In your own personal experience, you'll never actually run into your death. This isn't some wishful fantasy or spiritual comfort food. It's pure logic based on how awareness actually works. Let's dive into this intimate puzzle we all share. This edge that feels terrifying yet completely unknowable from where we're standing right now. The core riddle is this: how could you possibly experience the total absence of experience? It's genuinely impossible. Like trying to see your own eyeballs without any mirror, or touching this fingertip with itself. Death, as we normally think about it, means experience stops completely. But here's the catch. You only know anything through experience. So when someone says they're scared of being dead, what exactly scares them? They're afraid of experiencing a state where there's no experience at all. See the twisted logic there? It's like a kid terrified of the dark room. What's hiding in there? The kid asks. Absolutely nothing, the parent replies. And the kid thinks, nothing. That's the scary thing. But nothing isn't actually something to fear. Nothing literally means no thing exists. I remember chatting with students at a mountain retreat above Santa Barbara. One serious guy insisted he could imagine being dead. When I asked him to paint the picture, he said, "Everything's pitch black and I'm lying there still." I had to stop him right there. He wasn't describing death. He was describing being alive while imagining himself stuck in a dark coffin. He was still present to notice the darkness. This is the crazy trick your mind plays on itself. Every single time you try to picture your own non-existence, you sneak yourself back in as the witness. But in actual death, if the scientists are right, there's nobody watching. So being dead never shows up in your experience, ever. And isn't that absolutely wild? The thing people dread most in life is something they'll never actually encounter. From your consciousness's viewpoint, you're weirdly always alive. Not because you're immortal like religion's promise, but because the instant when you're not alive never appears in your story. What happens when you stare into a mirror? You see yourself, sure, but what you're really seeing is a reflection, a copy that represents you but isn't you. Death works in our minds like a strange mirror, one with a freaky feature. It reflects everything except what it actually is. We throw onto death all our worries, our wishes, our religious feelings, our deep thoughts. But death itself stays completely unknown. Isn't that weird? The one thing we know for certain will happen is the one thing we can't know anything about firsthand. I've always thought death is the ultimate impossible riddle, one of those Zen puzzles meant to shatter logical thinking. Ancient Zen teachers would give students impossible questions. What's the sound of one hand clapping? The point wasn't finding an answer with your brain, but exhausting your rational mind until it surrenders. Death is nature's impossible riddle for all of us. We keep trying to understand death using tools meant for life. It's like measuring heat with a ruler. The tool and the subject don't match. In Tibetan tradition, there's this beautiful concept called the bardo, the in-between state after death. What's fascinating is they describe it as a mirror showing you not what you want, but what you need to see. All your illusions get stripped away. But notice that even describing what happens after death, we must use the idea of seeing, as if someone's still there witnessing everything. So death stands before us as this impossible mirror where everyone sees something different and nobody can accurately report what they actually saw. Ancient Egyptians packed tombs with gold and treasures. Christians picture pearly gates in heaven. The materialist imagines total nothingness, but they're all just staring at reflections of their own minds. The mirror itself stays pristine and unknowable, and maybe there's deep freedom in recognizing this truth. If death can't be known, then it can't truly be feared. What we fear isn't death itself, but our ideas about it. And ideas, unlike death, can be released and let go. Have you noticed that you're only ever alive right now, never tomorrow, never yesterday? Your life doesn't unfold in the past or future. Those are just concepts, mental abstractions. Life only ever happens in this present instant. And here's something curious about this present moment. It has zero duration. The now isn't a tiny slice of time sandwiched between past and future. It's not in time at all. It's the only reality you ever touch. The past exists only as memory happening now. The future exists only as worry or excitement happening now. But the now itself simply is. So when exactly do you expect to die? In the future, naturally. But the future is forever just a thought. It never actually arrives as future. When what we call future actually happens, it's always now showing up again. This isn't word games or mental trickery. It's pointing directly at how time and awareness actually function. From your own experience's standpoint, there's only this eternal present. The contents of now change. Forms come and go like weather patterns, but now itself always remains. I remember watching waves crash on Big Sur Beach, noticing how each wave was totally unique, yet the ocean stayed constant. Our experiences are like those waves, rising up, peaking, dissolving away. But the ocean of awareness where they appear seems endless. It's simply here. The Upanishads, those ancient Hindu wisdom texts, say it poetically. That which is the finest essence, this whole world has that as its soul. That is reality, that is the self, that art thou, they're hinting that beneath. Experience's changing surface lies something unchanging, something that doesn't arrive or leave, isn't born and doesn't die. Now, I'm not demanding you believe this as religious dogma. I'm inviting you to look straight at your own experience. Have you ever experienced anything outside this now? Has your awareness ever actually been absent? If death means consciousness ending, isn't it constantly pushed off to a future that never actually shows up? The ending we fear exists only in imagination, never in actual experience. And isn't that extraordinary? The very thing causing us such worry might be nothing but a thought, an illusion created by thinking, never a reality found in the eternal now of actual living. Let's look at consciousness itself, this astounding mystery we're swimming in right now. What is it? Where does it come from? And most importantly for our exploration, can you picture its total absence? Here's a strange experiment. Try for just a moment to imagine consciousness being completely gone. Not sleep, not fainting. Those still involve some level of awareness, but total absence of any experience whatsoever. Can you manage it? If you think carefully, you'll discover something shocking. The very attempt to imagine consciousness being absent requires consciousness to do the imagining. It's Li. Key using light to search for darkness. The method defeats its own purpose. This isn't just philosophical wordplay. It points to something profound about awareness's nature. Consciousness seems to be the one thing that can't be turned into an object to examine, because it is the very medium where all examining happens. Zen Buddhists have a perfect phrase for this. They talk about trying to bite your own teeth or see your own eyes directly. You can't do it. Your teeth do the biting. Your eyes do the seeing. They're the subject, never the object. Similarly, consciousness is always the subject of experience, never its object. So what does this reveal about death? If death means consciousness stopping, and consciousness can't conceive its own absence, then death stays forever unthinkable to the one supposedly experiencing it. Think about deep, dreamless sleep. We say I slept deeply last night. But during that dreamless sleep, was there an I present experiencing it? No. The I reappears when you wake and retroactively claims the sleep happened. I slept. But during sleep itself, no experiencer existed. Death might be similar, but with one crucial difference. After death, there's no waking up to retroactively claim anything happened. So from consciousness's perspective, death never occurs. The lights don't go out because nobody's left to experience the darkness. The philosopher Wittgenstein said it clearly. Death is not an event in life. We do not live to experience death. It's outside the boundaries of what we can directly know. And isn't that strange? The thing we dread most is the one thing we can never actually meet. In Eastern philosophy, there's a fascinating approach to this mystery we're exploring. Many Eastern teachings suggest our ordinary waking state is itself a kind of dream, a construction rather than ultimate reality. Hindu tradition speaks of Maya, often translated as illusion. But Maya doesn't mean the world doesn't exist. It means we don't see it as it truly is. We see it through filters of our concepts, our conditioning, our limited viewpoints. And one of the most powerful concepts we impose is a separate self that's born and dies. But what if this separate self is itself part of the dream? What if, as the Upanishads hint, what you really are isn't this temporary personality but the eternal consciousness where all phenomena rise and fall? There's a beautiful Sanskrit phrase, tat tivam asi, that art thou. It points to the possibility that your essential nature is identical with reality's fundamental source. Not your ego, not your personal story, but the pure awareness at your core. In Buddhism, particularly Zen, there's this mind-bending concept of no self. It's the insight that when you search deeply for this supposedly permanent I, you actually can't find it. There are sensations, thoughts, perceptions, but no solid thing owning them. It's all process, flow, constant change. I remember talking with a Zen master in Japan. I asked what happens after death. He replied with a question. Who wants to know? His point cut deep. The very questioner, the I-fearing death, is precisely what's being questioned. If there's no permanent self, what exactly dies? The ancient Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi expressed this wonderfully in his famous butterfly dream. He dreamed he was a butterfly flitting around happy and content. Then he woke as Zhuangzi again, but now he wondered, am I Zhuangzi who dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming I'm Zhuangzi? This isn't mere philosophical games, it points to identity's fluid, dreamlike nature. And if identity isn't fixed, if boundaries between self and not self are thin and changeable, what exactly do we think dies? From this Eastern view, death may be less a final ending and more an awakening from the particular dream we call my life. Not to nothingness, but perhaps to a reality more fundamental than what we currently perceive through ego's narrow lens. In the West, we've developed a peculiar relationship with death, haven't we? Unlike traditional cultures, we've steadily pushed death out of sight, sanitized it, professionalized it. Death happens in hospitals now, not homes. The dead get whisked away by professionals, embalmed, made to look natural, though what could be less natural than making a corpse look alive? This cultural attitude reflects a deeper philosophical stance. Since the Enlightenment, the dominant Western view has been essentially materialistic. Consciousness is seen as a brain product, something that emerges from neural activity and stops when that activity ceases. Death in this view is absolute extinction. But there's something remarkable about this perspective few people notice. If consciousness depends entirely on the brain and stops completely at death, then death is precisely nothing. Not darkness, not emptiness, not void. Those are all experiences requiring consciousness. Death would simply be the complete absence of all experience. Now here's the fascinating part. How can anyone fear nothing? Not nothing as some black empty space, that's still something, still an experience, but actual nothing. The complete absence of experience, there's literally nothing there to fear. I'm reminded of Mark Twain's brilliant quip, I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born and hadn't suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. He's pointing at something profound. If death is non-existence, it's not something you experience, so it can't possibly be unpleasant or frightening. The Greek philosopher Epicurus made this point centuries ago. Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not pres. And when death is present, we do not exist. It's perfect logic demonstrating death can't be experienced. So the Western materialist view, followed logically, should actually eliminate death fear. Yet paradoxically, it's precisely in our materialistic culture that death anxiety seems strongest. Why? I think we confuse the process of dying, which might involve suffering, with the state of being dead, which involves zero experience. Or perhaps we truly can't imagine non-existence. Every attempt to picture nothing turns it into something, a blank space, a void, an emptiness. But true nothingness isn't a thing at all. So there's extraordinary irony here. The materialist, believing death ends consciousness, should fear death least, since nobody will be there to suffer anything unpleasant. Yet it's often the materialist clinging most desperately to life, as if something terrible awaits. Isn't that curious? We tend to think birth and death are opposites, one the beginning, one the end. But let me suggest a different view. What if birth and death aren't opposites at all, but rather two faces of the same coin, like a wave's crest and trough? Consider this. We don't remember being born. For each of us, consciousness seems to fade in gradually during early childhood. There are no memories of the birth process, of emerging from the womb. Our awareness, as far as we can tell, begins in the middle of things. We wake up already here, and perhaps death is similar, a fading out rather than sudden stop. Not an end in any absolute sense, but a transition to we know not what. Just as we emerged from what appeared to be nothing, perhaps we return to what appears to be nothing. The ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, captures this perfectly. It represents the eternal cycle, the continuous process where end and beginning merge into each other. I remember a child as, "King me, where was I before I was born?" What a marvelous question. And isn't it exactly like asking, "Where will I be after I die?" Both questions point to consciousness, appearing from and disappearing into what seems like nowhere. Buddhists have a concept called the unborn. It refers to that which never comes into existence and therefore never goes out of existence. It points to something in our nature that doesn't participate in birth and death at all. The pure awareness witnessing the show without being part of it. Think of it like the screen where a movie plays. Characters are born and die on screen, but the screen itself remains untouched, unchanged. It's neither born nor dies. It's the unchanging background where all change appears. Now, I'm not asking you to believe this as doctrine. I'm suggesting it as a possibility to contemplate. What if what you most essentially are was never born and therefore can't die? What if the body-mind's birth and death happens within consciousness rather than to consciousness? Look at it this way. Just as space holds all objects without being an object itself, perhaps consciousness holds all experiences without being an experience. And just as space isn't affected by objects appearing in it, perhaps consciousness isn't affected by experiences appearing in it, including experiences we call birth and death. Have you really thought about what you are? Not who you are, your name, history, roles, relationships, but what you fundamentally are. Because there's something extraordinary about your existence that's easy to miss. You are literally the universe becoming aware of itself. This isn't poetic fancy, it's physical fact. Every atom in your body was forged in a star's heart. The carbon, nitrogen, oxygen making up your tissues weren't created in the Big Bang. They were cooked in stellar furnaces billions of years ago and scattered across space when those stars exploded. As astronomer Arthur Eddington said, "We are bits of stellar matter that got cold by accident, bits of a star gone wrong." But I'd adjust that. Not wrong, but wonderfully, marvelously right. Because in you, the universe evolved eyes to see itself, ears to hear itself, a mind to contemplate its own existence. Isn't that amazing? So in a real sense, you're not in the universe. You are the universe, not a fragment of it, not apart from it, but the whole thing expressing itself as this particular being here and now. And the universe is a process, not a thing. A verb, rather than a noun constantly creating and recreating itself in endlessly new forms. What happens to an ocean wave? It arises, takes shape, moves, eventually dissolves back into the sea. Has it died? In one sense, yes, that particular wave no longer exists. But in another sense, not at all. The water composing it is still there, now part of other waves. The energy animating it continues in new forms. You're like that wave. The particular pattern you call me is temporary, yes, but the energy, the matter, the fundamental reality composing you continues. It can't be destroyed, only transformed. This isn't merely materialist perspective, because the most mysterious aspect of the universe isn't matter, it's consciousness. The fact that the universe is aware of itself through beings like us is the greatest miracle. And if consciousness is fundamental to the cosmos, not just an accidental byproduct, then perhaps it, like energy, can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. I'm reminded of the Hindu concept of Lila, the divine play, the idea that ultimate reality manifests as all the diverse world forms for sheer joy of self-expression and self-discovery, like an actor playing many roles or a musician improvising endless variations. In this view, death isn't an error or punishment. It's a necessary part of the cosmic dance. Without death, there's no renewal, no creativity, no evolution. Life would stagnate. The play would freeze into a static picture. So perhaps your immortality lies not in your particular ego pattern persisting, but in your identity with the whole. Not my immortality or yours, but existence itself's deathless nature, forever renewing, forever becoming. And you are that. There's a fascinating practice in many contemplative traditions, the conscious rehearsal of one's own death. Tibetans call it phawa. Ancient Stoics recommended daily meditation on mortality. Jesus spoke of dying to oneself. What are they pointing to? I think they're suggesting something radical, that we can experience a kind of death while still living. Not the body's death, but death of a certain way of being. The death of the ego as existence's center. Most of our death fear stems from identifying with a particular self-image, the story of who I think I am, my history, projected future, possessions, relationships, achievements, and failures. This bundle of thoughts, memories, sensations we call me. But what happens if we loosen this identification? If we recognize this me as itself fiction, useful for navigating the world certainly, but not the deepest truth of what we are? There's a Zen koan asking, what was your original face before you were born? It points to something in us preceding all our accumulated identities and stories. And that something doesn't fear death because it doesn't perceive itself as a separate thing that could die. I remember sitting in meditation once, and suddenly there was a shift. For a timeless moment there was seeing but no seer, hearing but no hearer, thinking but no thinker, just pure experience flowing without a center. In that moment, death fear was absolutely meaningless, because the I fearing death was seen as just another appearance. See in consciousness, not its essential nature. This isn't something you understand intellectually. It must be directly experienced. But when it is, extraordinary freedom comes with it. Not that you no longer care about bodily life, quite the contrary, but the desperate clinging, the existential anxiety from identifying with a temporary form begins dissolving. In a way, this is what all spiritual traditions point to, each in their own language. The small self's death to reveal the greater self, or as mystics say, die before you die. Discover what remains when the constructed self falls away. And what remains, not an entity, not a thing, but open awareness, not my awareness or yours, but awareness itself, borderless, luminous, at peace with its own impermanence, because it recognizes impermanence as life's very dance. Perhaps this is what Jesus meant, saying, whoever loses his life will find it. Not in the afterlife, but right here, right now. When we stop clinging to our limited self-definition, we paradoxically become more fully alive. We step out of death's shadow into a deeper reality's light. Our original face before we were born. We've been circling this extraordinary mystery together, approaching from different angles. Now I'd like to suggest something that might seem startling, but which I invite you to consider deeply. What if the universe's fundamental reality isn't matter or energy, but consciousness itself? What if awareness isn't produced by the brain, but rather the brain is an instrument evolved to focus and localize consciousness that's already everywhere? This isn't as far-fetched as it sounds to modern ears. Great physicist Max Planck, quantum theory's founder, wrote, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." And philosopher Schopenhauer suggested, matter is just the outward visible manifestation of the thing in itself, which he identified as will or consciousness. If we take this perspective seriously, an extraordinary possibility emerges. Your consciousness, the awareness reading these words right now, may not be your consciousness at all. It may be the one consciousness, the universe's intrinsic awareness temporarily localized and identified with this particular body-mind.